YouTube and welcome to a new video. I want to talk about this book, and from what I want to say about it, about sort of some books in general. This is called Music, Love, Drugs, War by Geraldine Quigley, which I think came out last year. Debut novel. Yeah, came out last year. So in the wake of Milkman's Booker success, there have been a whole flurry of books about the Northern Ireland experience growing up in the 70s, 80s and 90s under the Troubles. And, you know, quite right too, because so while there have been loads of documentaries and feature films, there hadn't until recently been all that much in literature. But obviously with the success of Milkman, it opened up an appetite for people to read novels like that. And last year I read Ghost Factory by Jenny McCarthy. This obviously this year. Now I have a vested interest in all things Northern Ireland and the Troubles, because I wrote my own last book, published book, was set against that backdrop. With one main difference, mine came out before the whole Northern Ireland bandwagon, but also I'm not from there, as you can tell from my accent. I've never lived there, I've never even visited there, so my book was a slightly different take. It wasn't a person who grew up in this era. Mine was very much drawn from my experience of someone living in London, on the mainland, observing as a child, you know, these events unfolding on the news every day, whereas most sort of British people weren't that engaged with it. It struck a chord with me, and then obviously part of the campaign of Irish independence, Northern Irish independence, moved on to Britain with bombs and things in London and other cities. But anyway, so this is a coming-of-age story, a group of school kids who are all just waiting for their, you know, take their final exams, and, you know, they're all doing underage drinking, they're all pairing off with each other, etc, etc. And then one of them gets killed by a plastic bullet fired by the British Army or the police, and it sends them all off spinning in different directions as their reactions from it. And the first half of the book is dire, absolutely dire. It does get more interesting when we start getting introduced to a couple of the characters who've reacted to the death of their friend by joining up with the IRA, and that was more insightful and more interesting to read. But the teenage stuff was just horrendous, and the main reason for that is the writing, and I want to talk about that specifically. You know, I give this book 2.5 out of 5. The extra half mark is because it does get better in the second half. There are lots of things in this book, and as I say, not unique to this book, about what really annoys me in writing, probably in British writing. I haven't really thought about it in terms of American writing, but in writing in general. And I say this as a writer, you know, maybe these things wouldn't matter to a reader who's not also a writer, so I make that caveat. I offer you this. You might think I'm you know, just got it horribly wrong and I'm being, you know, out of order. But, and as I say, I'm not picky on this book. It just happened to be the latest one I've read, and it annoyed me in a way I've been annoyed before by other books. So as a general thing that's really difficult, if you have a big cast of characters like this does, choreography is really important. Who is together with who in the shared space, and who are they talking about, or what are they talking about, who's saying what to whom, and how do you physically move them around within that space? Because how characters move, even if it's just staying on, you know, fixed in place, but how they gesture and things, tells you a lot about the nature of that conversation beyond the words. You know, it tells you about who holds the power, you know, and things like that. And someone like Franz Kafka is a master of choreography, because he's not only moving his characters around to inhabit a shared space so they can have a conversation. It is very much important where people are standing in relation to each other, because Kafka was so much about power, you know, dominant figures like his father or like the bureaucracy, and cowed figures like himself or like Joseph K or Kay in the trial and in the castle. And Kafka built that into his choreography seamlessly. You cannot see the joins in Kafka. You know, there's the brilliant scene in the hold of the ship in the beginning of America, his novel America. You know, it's almost like a painting by Velázquez or Tintoretto. You know, everybody's place is very sharply defined in terms of whose perspective, who's looking at who has the power over who. It's, Kafka is the apex of this art, and books like this, I'm afraid, are the nadir. So here's at page 200, so we're well into the novel here. 6 hours later at the McLaughlin house, he could barely control himself. Where is he? Why are you shouting at me? Shouted Liz. I'm going to kill them, both of them. Christie walked past her into the front room. He was unwashed and grey-faced. Who are you talking about? Said Liz. Your brother, where is he? Bernie came in from the kitchen. What's going on? She asked. Kevin brushed past her and left the house. He looks terrible, said Bernie. So we have characters here. We have Liz, Christie, Bernie and Kevin. And we have no idea who has started this scene where it goes 6 hours later at the McLaughlin house. He could barely control himself. Okay, well that rules out Liz and Bernie because they're both female. So it's either Kevin or Christie. But it turned out to be Kevin, but he's the last character actually named in this. We only sort of rule it out by, the fact that Christie walked past her into the front room. He was unwashed and grey-faced. I mean, it could have been him walking into the house, but then he's unlikely to be shouting, where is he? So it's sort of by deduction, by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7... By the 12th line in this paragraph, Kevin is finally mentioned. We realise that it's him. You have to do too much work to work out who's talking, who's holding the scene, which is really Kevin, because he's come in, burst into the room to demand, where is he? I'm going to kill both of them, which is sort of fairly major emotive statements, but we're not clear that it's Kevin saying them until later in the paragraph. And so there's a lot of poor choreography in this, that people are... The way to do something like that is, by all means, have characters talk across other characters, but you kind of have to set up the choreography first, where she's had characters talking across each other, but we don't know who's saying what, who's talking across who. Okay, now on to these very, very specific things. Okay. There was nothing as pleasant as using your degree to impress your less educated friends, and Noel Baxter made use of it as often as he could. But his languid bohemian image fell apart when he opened his mouth, a broad country accent betraying his Protestant farming background. Christie ignored the correction. Baxter might be older than him, he might have his own flat, but he was still a bit of a wanker sometimes. The Vietnamese definitely produced a better class of war, he said, checking out the room over the top of his glass as he took another drink. Looks like you stole the wrong book, Meehan, said Kevin. Hi, Charlie don't surf. Christie laughed. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Smells like victory. Both could spool off dozens of lines like this. Between them they had seen Apocalypse Now 5 times. The horror, mouthed Kevin softly. How are you feeling, Jimmy? Shouted Christie. Like a mean motherfucker, sir, replied Kevin. Okay, so first of all, Noel Baxter is a minor character, the least important of their group. So there was nothing as pleasant as using your degree to impress your less educated friends, and Noel Baxter made use of it. So, this is on page 6. So that is the author's excuse for showing off this little set piece, really. It has no reason, really, to exist other than it sort of shows the dynamic of part of the group. But when you introduce it by nothing as pleasant as using your degree to impress your less educated friends, that's kind of the author is falling into the same trap as what she describes for Noel here. The author is showing us that she's seen Apocalypse Now and has memorised all the good lines. And, that's fine, except, they're going through we used to do this with Monty Python lines when we were kids, and now it's films like Apocalypse Now. So, people do that, I'm not disputing it. But what does it add? Because all they're doing is they're churning out the lines of a film. It's not embedded in anything. It's not broadened out or opened up to convey anything else other than the back and forth of their spouting lines that are already in existence in the world. So I'm not sure the point of that. So the girls have gone to the toilet, this real sort of seedy bar, and there's no lock on the door, so they have to go in threes to sort of protect the privacy of the one in the toilet. So the two that are outside while their friend's actually in the toilet are talking. And this is page 9. You and Kevin are going with each other 3 months this week, said Orla, retouching her own lips. How do you know that, said Liz. I remember the night, said Orla. It was icy. Noel slipped on the road and fell. Was that 3 months ago? Nearly to the day, said Orla. Ooh, going steady, said Sinead sarcastically from behind the door. Hope you're on the pill, Liz. OK, so that's one of two things. Either it's all just a setup for the gag of Sinead going, oh, you need to be on the pill, I hope you're on the pill after going steady for 3 months with your boyfriend. OK, not a great gag, but one can allow that. But it's info dump. This is page 9. Two girls are stood outside a toilet, keeping the door, which has no lock, sort of shut, so their friend's privacy inside is preserved, which is actually quite a nice setup, I think. But then we just get them talking info dump. Oh, so now we know that Liz has been going out with Kevin for 3 months. But the way it's presented, how do you know that, said Liz. I remember the night, said Orla. It was icy. Noel slipped on the road and fell. So in her mind, she's eliding Noel falling on the ice and hurting himself, which you possibly would remember with Schadenfreude. But that has the same significance as the fact that that's the first night and Kevin and her friend Liz started going out. Why would Orla remember that? Why would that be significant to her, unless she had feelings for Kevin, which we have no indication that she has, compared with Noel slipping and hurting himself, which, could stick in the memory. They're not of equal weight, and that happens quite a few times. I'll come to another example of that. Liz was immediately enfolded in the lights, the noise, the smells of the house. Her mother was still up, ironing a mountain of clothes in the kitchen and listening to a story on the radio. The air hung with the scent of hot iron on cotton, the almost indistinct scent that was as much as sensation. Hot metal, the slightly scorched cover of the ironing board, the lingering essence of washing powder enhanced by steam, dampening the fabric, and ironing air. Well, she's gone the almost indistinct scent, and then there's given 3 or 4 different elements of what that scent is. So it's not indistinct at all, it's actually quite precise. Hot metal, the slightly scorched cover of the ironing board, the lingering essence of the washing powder enhanced by steam, and ironing air. So it's not indistinct. So that's just a contradictory sentence that doesn't, or paragraph that doesn't work. So this takes place in a riot at night time. The smell of smoke hung in the air as they got near the distinctive clamour of a riot. Shouts, engines, thuds, the sudden retort of plastic bullets, bang, bang, bang. Turning the corner, the scene opened out before them, illuminated by the glow of burning vehicles and reflecting the windows of the flats and maisonettes on either side of the road. Fire shimmered off shattered glass, 1,000 flecks of brimstone falling from the sky. The air was heavy with ignited petrol and the rage of hundreds of men moving, bending, reaching, running, all with a single purpose, joyous in their collective. OK, so there's some good description in there. There's some nice imagery. Fire shimmered off shattered glass, 1,000 flecks of brimstone falling from the sky. That's nice. But the previous paragraph has described a riot as, or has introduced us to the sensations of a riot as, the distinctive clamour of a riot. Shouts, engines, thuds, the sudden retort of plastic bullets, bang, bang, bang. Which is so lame. It's a list, and then we've got bang, bang, bang. That is not evocative in the way of 1,000 flecks of brimstone falling from the sky is. And then we get another list. The air was heavy with ignited petrol and the rage of hundreds of men, moving, bending, reaching, running, all with a single purpose, joyous in their collective. It's an odd mix where there's some really rich metaphorical writing, some really bland listed writing, and also the rage of hundreds of men, joyous in their collective. Can you have a joyous rage? I know what she's trying to say, and she's right, that people get swept up and carried off in the heady atmosphere of it. But, therefore, is it playing to their rage, or are they sucked up into the joy of it? Is it both? If it's both, is it still a joyous rage? I'm not sure that works. And I have to say, in one of my books called An Eye for an Eye, for an Eye, I also wrote a riot scene, and I used metaphor. I think when you're trying to describe scenes like this that are out of the ordinary, that are not small, that are not everyday, you have to make it evocative, you have to make it rich. And the image I employed was the colours of orange, orange fire, Molotov cocktails going off gets lighting up the blackness. I used the image of Greek pottery of that sort of orange on black glaze, and I used extending metaphor because I think you have to do that. Otherwise, it's just really bland writing about something that is not bland. This is a riot, for God's sake. Okay. So this is in the immediate aftermath. One of the kids' group has been killed by a rubber bullet, and Liz, who is the daughter who was of the parents Bernie and Jim, she's gone back and told them, and her friend, who's the girlfriend of the dead guy, who's called Orla, we've got to tell her before the parents find out on the news. So Bernie, her mum, and Jim, her dad, and her are sort of going round to the house of the girls, where the girl lives, to tell her that her boyfriend has died. Jim watched her as she rose stiffly from the seat to go and dress herself. Bernie was good with bad news. She would know what to say to the mother, how to put it across. But he knew from her face that a bit of her was defeated by the task. Maybe a piece of her that was still a girl, mad about a boy. How do you break that heart in someone else's child and not die a bit yourself? Well, is Bernie good at breaking news, or isn't she? Because if the second part of that is true, defeated by this task, then she's not good with bad news. And she wouldn't know how to put it across. So again, it's contradictory. Otherwise, it's a really interesting idea. How do you break that heart in someone else's child and not die a bit yourself? I mean, that's a really profound, interesting insight, but it's completely undermined by the nonsense that's gone before it. Okay, and on to another one. Okay, so this is a bit about a priest who has, up to, doesn't make a much appearance in the novel, but earlier was approached by Jim, who we've just mentioned, because Jim is worried that his son is about to join the IRA, and he wants the priest to talk some sense into his son to stop him joining the IRA. And one of the things that the priest says to Jim is, have you told your wife about this? And Jim goes, no, I couldn't, that'd be disaster. And the priest is going, well, he might, your son might listen to your wife more than you. You need to tell your wife. Jim does not tell his wife. So we've got the idea that this is a sort of a wise priest. Okay. Father Devlin was sitting down to a big fry, laid out in front of him like a sacrifice to the pagan gods. He lifted his knife and fork and was about to cut deep into a pork sausage when he heard the knock on the front door, and his heart fell. The other fellows were out. Father McDermott was doing the 8 o'clock mass, and Father Cusack had been called out in the early hours to administer the last rites to some dying old man, and hadn't returned yet. He looked at his fry, already cooling on the plate. Lifting the sausage in his hand, he ate it quickly before the inevitable tap on the door could stop him. Sorry, Father, there's a man here asking to speak to one of the priests, said the housekeeper softly. OK, he sighed, rising to his feet. The housekeeper moved to lift the plate. Sure, I'll put this to keep warm for you, she said, disappearing through the door again, fry in hand. Jim was waiting in the hall. Father Devlin remembered their conversation from weeks before. It didn't take much imagination to know what this was about. Something had happened to that stupid boy of his. He put on his concerned face. Right, so, first of all, Father Devlin was sitting down to a big fry laid out in front of him like a sacrifice to the pagan gods. Well, why to the pagan gods? There's nothing pagan about fried sausage and baked beans and bacon. It's not like in the Jewish religion, unkosher. So in the Catholic religion, there's nothing pagan about it at all. And this is 1981, so we're not talking about, healthy eating. That hadn't really reached the UK in 1981. So there's nothing profane or pagan about it at all. So that doesn't work. The other two priests are out. So one of whom is to administer the last rites to some dying old man. Well, that's not very sort of priestly and sympathetic. I assume that if this are three priests living together in the same parish, they would all know who had died and who hadn't. So you would know the name of some old man, even if you weren't the one going to give last rites to. And then finally, again, something had happened to that stupid boy of his. Well, it's absolutely fine to call the boy stupid. I don't have a problem with that. He put on his concerned face. It's an act. It's all shtick from the priest. So the first impression we had of the priest is someone who was wise, had good advice. Here is just someone who's going through the motions. It's not consistent. Okay, so this is when her son has returned from being interrogated by the police and the army, and Bernie has finally had it revealed that he's active in the IRA. And you, she said again. This time she looked up at her, afraid. There was a look of pure, dangerous fury on her face. He had never seen her look like that, not even when he was little and broke the window in the back door with a football. So you're comparing the rage as a child breaking a window, where, yes, the mother would be annoyed, would be angry, would be furious, but you're comparing that to the same level as just finding out your son's joined a terrorist group and risks being killed. They don't compare, I'm afraid. It doesn't hold up. So, you know, again, I'm not picky on this book. This just happens to be a book with lots of the things that really annoy me. I'm really interested to know what you feel about. I mean, you might feel that I've stacked the deck against by, you know, the book isn't that all the way through. But I have to say, first of all, there's two parts to this book. The second half, which is about, you know, the boys in the RA and stuff, doesn't have much of that, although that bit on page 200 about the choreography. But it does have those choreographic difficulties all the way through. It does have inconsistencies of characters quite a lot, and it does have some really awfully butchered metaphors that are completely, you know, the one thing you're comparing to the other is completely mismatched. So I'm interested to know what you feel. You know, am I being unreasonable, or would those things annoy you as well? So let me know. Yeah, I'm afraid I didn't enjoy this book. 2.5 stars. Okay, till next time.